Beyond the familiar maps of Middle-earth, past the peaks of the misty mountains and the dark lands of Mordor, lies a vast and enigmatic realm. It is a land of beginnings, a place shrouded in shadow and whispers. A land known as Rhûn. This was where the first elves awoke to the stars, and where the first men took their waking breath. But this cradle of life was also a wellspring of darkness, a place where the will of dark lords took root, corrupting its people and turning them against the West. It was home to not only men and elves, but to 4 forgotten clans of the Dwarves, 2 of the most mysterious wizards, and creatures of myth and legend. Welcome to Scarlet Reveries. Today, we journey into the vast, uncharted lands of Rhûn to uncover the secrets of the East. Our story begins in the dawn of the world. Far to the east, on the shores of a lost sea called Cuiviénen, the elves first awoke. While many would undertake the great journey west toward the light of the Valor, a group known as the Avari, the unwilling, chose to remain in their ancestral lands. It's believed that some of these very elves were captured and twisted by the first Dark Lord, Melkor, in those ancient days, becoming the first of the monstrous race of orcs. While some Avari would eventually wander westward, many remained, their fate lost to the histories of the West. Thousands of years later, the world had changed. In a land called Hildorien, to the far east of Rhûn, the second-born children of Ilúvatar, the race of men, awoke. Like the elves before them, many began a great migration westward, seeking a new destiny. On their journey, they would encounter not only the lingering Avari elves, but another ancient race, born of the very rock of the earth, the Dwarves. Of the 7 fathers of the Dwarves, only 3 awoke in the western and northern mountains we know from the tales. The fathers of the remaining 4 clans, the Iron Fists, the Stiffbeards, the Blacklocks, and the Stonefoots, all awoke in the east. The location of their great mountain halls remains a mystery, said only to be as far from the Misty Mountains as the Misty Mountains were from the Blue. As the migrating men met these dwarves, they found that some had already fallen under a shadow, their hearts filled with greed and distrust. While the noble houses of the Edain continued their journey to the west, many tribes of men remained in the lands of Rhûn. Over the ages, these people would become known to the world by a single name, the Easterlings. But Rhûn was home to more than just elves, men, and dwarves. It held creatures unique to its lands. In the fields near the Sea of Rhûn roamed the kine of Arrah, a breed of wild, formidable oxen. Legend claimed they were descended from the cattle of the huntsman of the Valor, Orome himself. These mighty beasts have a direct and famous connection to the Fellowship of the Ring. Nearly 1,000 years before the War of the Ring, Vorondil, an ancestor of Boromir, hunted the kine of Arrah. From the horn of one of these great creatures, he fashioned the Great Horn of Gondor, an heirloom passed down the line of stewards, all the way to Boromir, whose fateful blast would echo at his last stand. Rhûn was also home to a more debatable creature, the werewyrms. Our only reference comes from Bilbo Baggins, who once boasted he would walk from here to the east of East and fight the wild werewyrms in the last desert. Were they real, terrifying beasts of the sands, or merely a fantastic creature from Hobbit legend? The histories do not say, leaving them coiled in mystery. Just as he had done with the elves, the Dark Lord Morgoth traveled east to sow his seeds of corruption among the newly awakened men. Many Easterlings fell under his dominion, an ancient allegiance of shadow that would be inherited by his most terrible servant, Sauron. Throughout the Second and Third Ages, Sauron would repeatedly use the East as a sanctuary to hide and rebuild his strength, and as a fertile ground for recruiting followers. As Sauron's power grew in the Second Age, the Valar sent 5 wizards, the Astari, to Middle-earth. 2 of them, clad in sea blue, were sent to the east. Their story is one of Tolkien's greatest mysteries, with two tantalizing possibilities. In earlier writings, they were thought to have failed, perhaps founding secret magic cults that outlasted Sauron. But in his later notes, Tolkien gives them a far more heroic purpose and names: Morinehtar, the Darkness Slayer, and Rómestámo, the East Helper. They arrived in the very year Sauron forged the One Ring and traveled deep into the east and south to stir up rebellion and disrupt Sauron's growing empire. During these dark years, Sauron gifted one of the 9 rings of power to an Easterling lord named Khamûl. With it, Khamûl became a mighty sorcerer and king among his people, but at a terrible cost. He faded into a wraith, a slave to the One Ring. Khamûl the Easterling became second in command of the Nazgûl, surpassed only by the Witch King of Angmar. And men were not Sauron's only allies from the east. In the Great War of the Last Alliance, we are told that while the dwarves of Durin's folk fought against Sauron, other dwarves did not. It is almost certain that these were dwarves from the 4 clans of Rhûn, tragically marching alongside the very orcs, who were their ancient enemies. After Sauron's defeat by the Last Alliance, his spirit fled once more to the far east to lick its wounds. For a time, the lands of Rhûn were free, but the darkness lingered in the hearts of many. Over the centuries, the Easterlings would launch devastating invasions against the kingdom of Gondor, continuing the ancient war their dark master had begun. 1,000 years into the Third Age, Sauron's spirit began to take shape once more, eventually settling in a fortress that would be called Dol Guldur. At this time, the remaining 3 wizards arrived in Middle-earth. One of them, Saruman the White, the leader of their order, would soon journey into Rhûn, spending nearly 1,500 years in the east. What he learned there, what secrets he uncovered, we can only guess. Did he ever encounter the Blue Wizards in his long travels? The chronicles are silent. When Gandalf later investigated Dol Guldur, Sauron fled, retreating again to the east. For 400 years, he rallied the Easterlings, gathering his strength. During this time, the Blue Wizards, Morinehtar and Rómestámo, were tasked with finding Sauron's dwelling, but were unsuccessful. Centuries later, the Dwarves of the East would answer a call for vengeance. The 4 kingdoms of Rhûn sent their warriors to join the bloody war of the Dwarves and Orcs, seeking to reclaim the ancient home of Khazad-dûm. After the war, the survivors returned to their homes in the east. Yet, as the shadow of Sauron grew once more, many of these dwarves began to abandon their ancient halls, migrating as far west as the Blue Mountains, where Frodo Baggins himself encountered some of these exiles. Tolkien's later writings give us a final crucial clue about the Blue Wizards. He suggests that their mission in the east and south was, in fact, successful. They worked to foment rebellion and sow discord among the peoples loyal to Sauron, ensuring that the forces he unleashed upon the west were far less than they could have been. Without these East helpers, the armies of Gondor and Rohan might have been utterly overwhelmed. Morinehtar and Rómestámo were not failures. They were unsung heroes, whose victory was won in lands the West never saw. Even so, the Easterlings' might was felt in the War of the Ring. They fought at the climactic battle of the Pelennor Fields, and waged a great war in the north against the dwarves of Erebor and the men of Dale. In both cases, they were ultimately defeated. With the destruction of the One Ring, Sauron was vanquished forever, but the evil he bred did not die with him. After his coronation, King Elessar, Aragorn, and his friend King Éomer of Rohan rode east with their armies. We are told that beyond the Sea of Rhûn, the thunder of the cavalry of the Mark was heard, as they fought to subdue the last of Sauron's allies and bring peace to those troubled lands. And so, Western Rhûn was finally brought into the fold of the reunited kingdom. But questions remain, echoing from the vast expanse of the east. What became of the dwarves of the Iron Fists and Stonefoots? Would the Easterlings finally be free from the shadow that had dominated them for millennia? And what was the final fate of the Blue Wizards, the saviors of the East? These are the whispers that drift from a land of ancient beginnings and long shadows, a land of forgotten peoples and untold stories, the land of Rhûn. If you enjoyed this journey into the lost histories of Middle-earth, be sure to like, subscribe, and join us again here at Scarlet Reveries for another tale from the world of fantasy and legend. Thank you for watching.